This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
And a big welcome back to everybody out there in podcast land. Thanks for taking us along for the ride. Hopefully you're headed out to the field here shortly or on your way there now. If not, I appreciate you taking us to work, to home, to wherever we might be. We are going to have some fun today in the Hunt Nebraska cabin. We have a special guest in studio. We have the Christy Christiansen coming in to talk a little deer hunting and all that type of stuff. This is the first time you've been with us.
I know.
What is your title? It's the First Lady of Nebraska Bow Hunting. Isn't that what they call you?
Sure.
Nebraska's First Lady.
Right behind Carol Mock, okay.
Yeah. Nebraska's Second Lady.
Second Lady.
Yeah. Oops. Nebraska's Second Lady of Bow Hunting.
There you go. Well, welcome to the show today. I know you've been in the field a little bit as well. Those that are watching us on YouTube, you can already see Jeff Rawlinson with Nebraska Game and Parks. You can hear him as well. He's already helped welcome Christy in. Behind the buttons, the lights and all that at Mission Control, we've got our good buddy from the National Wild Turkey Federation, Michael Addison, in-house. Me, Hershy. And we are here. We are in deer season, right? And we can claim that now. It's the month of November, hours away from the start of the November firearms season. Archery season's been going on for a while. We've already had the special landowner season. We've already had the special October antlerless private land season as well. And by the time we get the editing done on this, especially on the front end of it, Jeff, deer season will already be open. So. Yeah. One of the things that you hear quite a bit about, and folks, you've seen it, whether it's in a sales catalog, if you've been at the sporting goods stores, when you go over to the deer hunting section, the scent control products, big market for that type of stuff. And it has been for some time. Because as we know, the number one sense that a deer has for keeping itself safe is the sense of smell. Mm-hmm. If they smell you, it's a done deal. Unless you get that deer that just kind of throws caution to the wind and says, what's that? Either it's curiosity or something's happened. That's right. The rut is on. So we're going to get into that. I don't know that we'll have time for the other scents because there's a whole nother world and, urine scents and tarsal gland scents and attractants and calming scents and all that type of stuff. But we've got some deer hunters in the studio. Now, Michael, you say you didn't get the chance to grow up and do a lot of deer hunting, though.
I mean, I did it. I just didn't do it as much as I did turkey hunting, but I still went.
Okay. All right. So you'll be kind of our unbiased individual in here.
Scent control is not usually a big deal to me. So
the turkey was. Yeah. If the turkeys could smell,
no, they'd be the hardest thing to kill in the woods.
Never kill one.
We'd never kill one.
Never.
Turkeys would be everywhere. We never get it done.
I think they'd like the way I smell. I'm going to give myself more credit than that.
I bet you think that.
Well, I'm going to toss this out there right now. I think some of us stink more than others. I'm
True.
on that side that I think a deer smells me, they're gone. Now, if they smell my wife, they're like, oh, that's not bad. And they get right up there because it doesn't matter, folks, how many times we go deer hunting and we could sit in the same spot. She's going to see twice as many deer as I will. Just guaranteed. And her scent control, we'll get into that here in just a little bit, a lot different than mine. So we know, first and foremost, always hunt with the wind basically in your nose, so it's hitting you in the face to push that out. But beyond there, I think we've got players in here that are a little bit different on the scent control spectrum as we go. So I just going to toss this out, and since you're here for the first time, our special guest, Christy, we're going to start with you.
All right.
What is the process? Do you have a protocol that you follow to try to limit the amount of scent you have on your deer hunting clothes?
Definitely. And what I try to do is, well, face it, guys, we stink, right? And we just,
figuratively and literally.
We do. And
not Hershy.
No,
Hershy.
yeah, he's
not turkeys.
And not turkeys. So, but, you have to look at like our sense of smell is about, and I did a little research, and we have about what they call like 30 million olfactors or sensors, in or receptors in our nose. We're about 30 million. Dogs are like 220 million. deer are about 227 million. Now, this is scientific, but even the scientific people go, well, it could be this and it could be this, because they can't determine what they're smelling. Like for us, we walk in the house, walk down the hallway, and I can smell a casserole dish. I can smell there's something in the oven cooking, right? Mm-hmm. And the deer probably is like, wow, I can smell something in the oven cooking, and it's made with these ingredients and this and that. Because
I hate to tell you, Christy, but that deer is walking in smelling all that. Plus, this was bought at Hy-Vee. I can smell the plastic bag. I can smell the whatever's on the shoes and somebody's.
And she's using Corel, in the oven, and But I think they've just got that much more detail, of all of those things. But can they? You think mentally wise, are they able to nail that down? Oh, is that come from a human? Oh, does that, So I think if you do as much as you can, because you can't always beat the wind. How many times you've been in a stand and the wind just started swirling on you? It was, and then it just screws everything up. All the things that you planned, things like that, it can mess everything up. So we personally wash our clothes in the scent-free thing. And most of it is, even you got to keep in mind of the UV brighteners, because if you use regular, not only do they have good sense of smell, they got great sense of eyes, so you want to at least get rid of that brightener thing, because, how many times are you in a stand where you swear I didn't move, I didn't breathe or whatever, and that deer's standing there looking right at you, so did he smell me? Did he see me? Did he hear me? It can be all of those factors. And so eliminating that as much as possible. So we wash our stuff. We hang our clothes on the line. We'll have a campfire even outside, because I don't really think the fire smell bothers them that much. I mean, how many times have they burnt fields and the deer are walking right behind the burned field? Okay. Because they know, they're burning a field. Guess what? Now I can get to new grasses. The turkeys will do the same thing. It's still burning and those birds are following it.
So you say you do have a campfire?
Yeah, sometimes we do.
On the line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we keep all of our clothes in plastic tubs. I do like the little scent wafers that they sell that smell like a particular, I like the dirt smell. The earth scent, because it just gives it that dirt, really good. I love that smell, by the way. Put a little behind my ears. Love that stuff. It's just this good smell.
I think it's association with something good happening. I got to go hunting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And depending on, if I'm hunting in the Pine Ridge area and stuff, well, I'm going to use that pine scent. Or, and plenty of times when I'm walking through the woods, I'll grab a cedar branch and pull on it and kind of rub it on me, and, to kind of get a little bit more cover scent. So there's all of those things. And we usually try to spray down, before we hit the field. We wear rubber boots because they don't absorb the smell like a leather boot will. And then one other product that we've been using quite often is called Nose Jammer. And basically it's a spray that you just kind of spray out. You can spray it on yourself if you want to, but it's supposed to kind of like get in their nose. You know how you'll get a whiff of something and then you're kind of backed up, like, what is that? And it kind of blocks you smelling all the other things, because all I can smell, it's like you walk in, biscuits and gravy. I can't smell nothing but biscuits and gravy. I didn't notice that the dog pooped on the floor, because it's like,
that's a whole nother topic right there.
Absolutely. But to me, it's if you can do the best that you can, of course, wind is number one. And I'll give you a quick story. Over the weekend.
But before you go there, the Nose Jammer, is that the stuff that has that vanilla?
Kind of smells. I think it's kind of like a cotton candy, like a vanilla baby powder type thing.
Vanilla baby powder.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of what it reminds me of. But we hunted a couple weeks ago. My husband and I, Shorty and I, both shot a deer same morning, and we'd walked in on that path, and I don't think deer really bother that much if you walk in on a certain path, that they'll tend to cross it. A coyote won't.
Okay.
How many times have you walked across a trail and that coyote hits your trail and goes like this and turns around and goes the other way?
Yeah.
And, and I don't know if they just associate differently than deer do. Possibly.
A little bit more secretive, I think, overall. I would.
Yeah, maybe.
Speculate, yeah. Now, with your clothes, you've got totes. Where do you change into them? Back at the camp, back at house, or you wait until you get into the field?
A little bit of both. Like we'll put on our base layers and things like that, and then usually we'll finish getting dressed like outside the truck. After we get there, we pull on our extra layer, and then I also carry in an extra layer because I don't want to sweat to death while we're going in there. You have too many clothes on, and then next thing you know, not only are you sweating and smelling more, but now I'm sweating, I'm wet, and then I'm going to get cold. So I usually carry those extra
You think
layers.
you have a problem with that? You talk to us fat kids. We really have. That's an issue. That could be an issue.
I knew that line was coming out.
Let me tell you right now, we got to deal with it.
Yeah, and so that can be an issue depending on how far you walk in, and we typically use climbers a lot. So not only do I have to, walk into the woods, now I got to get in my tree stand and climb my tree with my climber. So that takes a lot more effort than just walking up a ladder.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
That's interesting. Not a lot of people using climbers nowadays. That's interesting.
No, and we do that quite a bit. But when Shorty and I were hunting that day, we both shot a doe, and mine just walked right down that path that we walked in. I shot her at 12 yards. Never knew I was there.
Nice.
The first one kind of like, ooh, what's that? And ran off a little bit. And then the larger, more mature deer just stood there and gave me a great shot.
Just off you go.
But the wind was out of the north. I was on the south side of the trail. Shorty was hunting 80 yards further down. He was on the north side of the trail.
Uh-oh.
He got busted twice. And a group of deer came in, and they got to a certain part, and then you know how that is. And then you're really on edge and really watching. And that third group walked in, and he'd seen him out of the corner of his eyes, and he goes, I'm not giving them a chance to bust me. And he's at full draw by the time that doe had stepped into the clearing, and then he shot her. But, but they did. All of them smelled him.
that's
Every one of
something
them
else.
smelled him.
That's pretty cool. And this is a side note, Jeff. I wonder if that climber thing that you and Shorty use quite a bit, I wonder if that's being replaced by those tree saddles.
I could see
little bit lighter weight.
you guys being
Oh,
candidates
heck
for those.
no.
I could see that.
Either one, I'm going to move so much and like be, like a 12-year-old in a swing, I'm over there. I can't sit still anyway.
From tree to tree.
Or it's going to lull me to sleep, and I'm going to be napping up there.
Don't have to worry about scent anymore if you're bouncing from tree to tree. But like a lineman. But
that is exactly what
I was talking
doing.
in general terms, but we're seeing a lot more of those walk in. They have climbing steps, I think, and then they
But
kinda
it's still
hang
just
there in
as
the
much
saddle.
effort because you've got to put up the sticks, especially if you're bringing them in and out. If you're going to leave the sticks there and then hang your saddle every time, that's different. But if you're hunting
Which
public
makes
ground
sense
like
to
we
me.
do,
Yeah.
yeah,
that doesn't make
we're
sense.
always switching. It's like, oh, the wind stinks, and and we're gonna switch, and literally that's how we did it this last time. We figured out where they were crossing the creek, and we got on the other side of it. And
Nice thing about both of those is I do have some hang-ons. I do have some ladder stands, and I've walked out. We probably all have, and it's a beautiful west wind. It's just beautiful. So you go to your stand that you just love to hunt in the west wind. You climb up there, and all of a sudden, it's a north wind now. It's changing, and now like the option is stay there and bust everything. Hope that a scent death deer walks in, which isn't going to happen, or you just get down and like, all right, go on to the next thing. All right, Jeff. So, does any of your scent control procedures, protocols change for you when you're hunting with the firearm?
Well, it really does.
Then from Christy's.
Yeah, it really does. And I'll be the first to say this. I don't think your scent control has to be as critical when you're hunting with a firearm as you are. But now that depends on how you're hunting, right? It doesn't matter if you got a rifle. If you're setting up in a pinch point or a funnel where the deer, by the time you see them, they're going to get a shot, or they're only 40 yards out, then you got to practice more scent control. But I think if you're out in the Pine Ridge and you're sitting there in an alfalfa field or a cornfield and you're looking out 300 or 400 yards across the field, then it's a matter of wind direction. You're not going to necessarily fool them. So you just play the wind. But I actually wrote a paper on this years ago, and so
Really?
I can tell you right now,
We're gonna have to see that, Michael.
This
That'd
is
be good.
This
We
is a
can
complicated
post that on Hunt Nebraska.
complicated discussion because deer are a complicated animal. Christy was right in that deer have sensors, receptors, and of course you think of scent. What is scent? People always like, what is scent? Is scent wet? Is it dry? What is it? Well, it's a molecule. If you think of it as molecules, and for lack of a better term, just think of little bubbles floating around the air that attached to a receptor in your nose. The cilia in your nose catches them, attaches to an epithelial type receptor, and then olfactory epithelium, and then it sits there and it's being interpreted. And the more of those molecules that it can be interpreted, the more scent you can smell, right? And if a deer is, you're about in that ballpark, and if a deer has almost 300 million sensors in its nose, and a human has, say, 5 to 10 million sensors in its nose, and a dog is somewhere in that 30, 40 million, or coyotes in that, be 100 million. So you start to see that there's a lot of differences, and you go, okay, there's the ability to capture more of those molecules and interpret what they are. And so, yes, I think that I think humans can hardly fathom what a deer can make out when it comes to scent. Like, we can smell a smell in a room. You walk in, like I said, we can smell that, the major smell. The deer can smell, like you said, the ingredients and what store, so they can interpret a lot more. The problem with deer is they have very little experience from which to interpret from. If I walk into a room and I smell an orange peel and biscuits and gravy, I have experience to interpret what that means. Both good things. Mm-hmm. If I walk in and I smell something that I can relate to being bad or dangerous, and I have the ability to reconnect that memory, then I can associate with something that I run or flee. Well, deer are kind of the opposite. If it smells like something that they can associate a memory or associate something that's positive, they're more apt to be curious. We call them curious because how many scents do they smell in the wild that have not killed them? They're still alive. They smell millions of scents. So we call that curiosity. They come into this smell. And it may not be that they've smelled raspberries, but it's a sweetness that they key in on. Or it's the nuttiness of corn that they can key in on, right? And so they smell that smell in a general term. But if it's been a danger, then of course they run. But deer also, when they can't interpret it, they have no experience to interpret the smell, they also can flee because it's, I don't know what this is, scary, move, gone. And the ones that stay alive and become big old ripe old deer generally have that flee factor, because they don't understand or can't interpret the smell, versus those that just say, well, I don't know what it is, but it never tried to shoot me before. It never made a noise, so maybe I'm not so worried about that. So, given that, I look at scent, very similar, but there's some differences. I think there is times you can confuse them, look scents, different types of scents on the market and whatnot. But however, we've all had deer that as soon as they smelled you, they busted you no matter what scent you had out there. But that deer may have had a negative experience with whatever scent you were putting out there. Your own scent. And so, but when I'm out in the field, firearms, looking at, 100, 200 yards, I don't worry about it. I play the wind. I'm going to show up. I'm camping for 3 or 4 or 5 days. I'm going to show up with, like you said, Christy, campfire clothes. I don't know that causes much of a problem, but I do know that when that, buck walks out into the middle of an alfalfa field, I don't want my scent cone going right into that spot. Sure. Because I think that can cause flight or, a flight response.
Mm-hmm. So where are your hunting clothes right now? You deer hunting with, Christy?
They're in a tub in my one of my rooms. Except for the stuff I just recently worn, they're still laying at the base of my bed in the bedroom because I haven't had time to wash them yet.
Wash them and go.
Yeah.
Where's your deer hunting clothes right now,
some are in my camper, some are in my bedroom. I got some in the basement. I probably still am looking for. There's some in the truck. It's going to sound really bad, but I don't give it that much. But again, I've been bow hunting this year, right? So I'm not worried about it. Most of my clothes are in the duck, the duck blind type scenario. And so when I go out firearm deer hunting, I'll take a little more precaution. But there's a difference between your controlling your scent and using scent to control deer. And I will use scent to control deer, but I don't necessarily control my scent.
Explain that.
Well, for example, I might go out in the middle of an alfalfa field and set down some 35 millimeter film canisters with doe estrus urine on them. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go back to a blind and sit down. I'm not overly worried about me and stinking and all that. But I am wanting that deer when he comes out in that field to stop in that area or to go over, to navigate, no matter where he goes past that field, to smell that doe and estrus and move back to that spot. And so I'll use that to manipulate their movement or control their movement a little bit. When I do bow hunt, I'll put 35 millimeter film canisters out there with cotton balls with some estrus lure or some buck urine. You know, they call it dominant buck urine. You never know how dominant that buck really was. You just know it's buck urine. You hope it's buck urine. But anyway, I'll set that out there because, you know, for a bow hunter, a deer walking by is a lot harder to kill than a deer that walks out and stands in front of you for 3 or 4 seconds. And the goal for descent is to get it to stop for 3 or 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Michael, we might have just split our listeners from those thinking, oh yeah, 35 millimeter canisters. Yep. And the others that are going to be going to Shields and Cabela's and
they're like,
going to the
what's
hunting
35
department.
millimeter?
I need to get some 35 millimeter film canisters.
Do you guys sell film canisters? No.
That probably dates me right there.
You can try Radio
See,
Shack.
back
You
in
can
the
still
day,
find one.
it was shortly after the dinosaurs died.
There's something around
When
that
we
corner.
invented a camera, we had 35 millimeter film, and they had a plastic capsule that film would go in.
Useful.
It was very,
super
very
useful.
you know, when that cap goes on,
Now
they're
they could
airtight.
just use pill bottles. We'll
You
just,
can
you
use
know,
pill
we'll
bottles.
throw
Yeah,
it
those
out
are
there.
child proof. Those
they are
film
coming.
canisters
The deer
That's why
can't
Jeff
open
doesn't use
those.
I sit out there for hours sometimes trying to get
Figure
that
that
darn
out.
lid off. That's not good.
But I like to instead of calling them an attractant, I like to call them a distraction. A distractant.
I agree there, yeah.
Because
That's a good one.
I'm really trying to just distract him enough where he's not paying attention to me.
Yep.
And where I can get away, especially as a bow hunter, you know, I can get away with those movements. I'm shooting deer less than 20 yards, almost always. I think I've only shot maybe 3 or 4 deer that were further than 30 yards. And maybe not even, maybe right at that 30, 35, you know, all of them has been super, super close, you know, and I like the distractants, you know, using a mock scrape, you know, keeping them out. I do like the little wafers. They look like leaves, like a little plastic leaf,
Okay.
and then have like the licorice anise scent, you know, whatever
Sure.
they call it. We're using one now called like something 365. I don't know what it is, but it's got the estrus, it's got all kinds of stuff all kind of
Mixed
together.
in together.
Basically,
Yeah.
tries to overload them.
Yeah, and doing that, and then, you know, we've talked about this before a lot. I use decoys, and it's just that enough to get them to be distracted, you know. And the buck I shot last year would never have shot this deer if I wouldn't have had a decoy.
Wouldn't have the decoy. Now, do you have to do anything scent control, or do you add scent to that decoy?
No, usually we leave it outside. You know, same thing, leave it outside, and then sometimes we'll put, you know, something along by their feet, or we'll even hang a cotton ball like underneath the tail, give them some doe and estrus, whatever. But you know, the does are just as curious as the bucks are, and it seems like the ones that attack it the most are the small little bucks. They decide just take those things out every time.
Always something to prove.
That's my fear is I have folks used a decoy from time to time. I have taken deer with it, but I'm always worried about those little, you know, basket rack or you know, forkies or whatever knocking it over, because mine's not all that fancy by any means. She's kind of wobbly, to be honest with you. But
Ours is a
I'm just
bionic
worried.
one.
Like all of a sudden, here we go. There's Mr. Big in the background. Here comes Mr. Basket Rack, knocks her over, and the whole gig is over for everybody. So,
Well, I want to hear about his bionic one.
Oh, well,
what do you mean
it's bionic. Well, can
Bionic.
you know, $6 million man, you know, we can rebuild him, right? Oh, you wouldn't believe how many times we've had to put this deer back together. She's got bolts in her legs and
Humpty
she's
Dumpty
got
deer.
screws. We've had to drill holes directly through her feet because they broke off the little clips where the stakes go
Stakes
in.
go,
So
yeah.
we've got holes right through their feet trying to get them in there. Oh yeah, Old Daisy's been rebuilt quite a bit.
We've now dated our listeners for a second time with the $6 million man reference. Folks, if you were born after 1990, this podcast may not make a lot of sense to you at some points.
Oh, the $6 million key. Yeah, that was a great show.
It was a
what would
great
that be
show.
in today's dollars?
Lee,
now? By
Lee
the way,
Majors.
billions.
Lee Majors.
The way to the inflation man. That's what they call it today. The inflation man.
Inflation, man.
Way too much money.
Oh, boy.
I
my
gotta
gosh.
say, I'm kind of in between you guys. Where I grew up, we had to use shotguns only during gun season. That was it. Most of our deer, we talked about it earlier this week, Jeff, at a Learn to Hunt workshop. Even then, the average deer was taken at about 14 yards, and so
Because
it
you were
was
driving, right? Walking and driving mostly,
not always.
or blocking.
I've always been kind of lazy, Christy. I don't know if you know that about me. So I've always loved to sit on a bucket and stand. Slowly got above that 6 and 7 foot height that I originally put the stands at. There were some deer drives and things like that, which could be a really close shot. But it was one of those things that I kind of worried about a little bit more at times than perhaps I needed to. But there is something neat. I've got a beautiful white pine in my backyard right now, which the neighbors just know when deer season's coming up, Michael, because all of a sudden I'll have clothes out there, air drying, and there's something neat about that scent. I just associated, like you were talking about, that your dirt wafers that you have. That scent of that white pine in my clothes when I put them on, just like, oh yeah, this feels good. This feels right. This is
like going to grandma's house.
And
it's just that.
I used to do that with my clothes when I was really, when I'm bow hunting. I used to do that years ago. I'd take cedar boughs and I'd rub them up, and throw them in a bag with my clothes, And boy, you'd come out after, letting them sitting there for months and you pull them out and it's like, oh my God.
It's strong.
Oh, very strong.
I've seen people pour dirt and acorns and stuff on top of clothes in a plastic tub and they just sit there in the off season.
What I found, though, was you had to be careful with the cedars is all of a sudden you'd be sitting there and all of a sudden you'd feel this thing poking you in the back.
It's like, I missed
or in the side of the neck, like, oh, my goodness, there's a piece of cedar in there all over.
Not only that, but you got to be careful of, and I remember real quick here, my brother-in-law and I are bow hunting one evening, and we get back to the truck, and he had pinned like 4 or 5 of those earth scent and cedar scent wafers on his clothes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about it. He just put them all on. And we get back to the truck, we're driving back, and I may have been going a little too fast. I don't remember the details, but we get pulled over. And the trooper walks up, and he rolls down I roll down the window just a little bit, and that woof comes out. Our eyes are just bloodshot because we're smelling it in the car. And he goes, whoa, like that. And he says, that's a pretty strong odor you got coming out of there. And right then it hits me. Ruh-roh. This is a misunderstanding if I ever heard of one. And he goes, you're lucky I'm a hunter, guys. And
because I know that smell.
That's what he said. I know that smell. And I'm like going, man, I'll tell you might know that smell, but on my brother-in-law, it just taken on a whole unique twist, let me tell you. But he was great about it. Great guy. But just for a brief moment, I thought, this is interesting.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But I can remember back in the day, when I first started bow hunting, we didn't do any of that stuff because we didn't know better.
Same.
It was not something. But I believe when it comes to most things that are marketed, it's just like, I swear Hallmark must have invented Valentine's Day just so they could sell cards, right? And so, I think it can be the same thing. You get a little crazy with, this gimmick and that gimmick and this gimmick, and look at, you look at Fred Bear. He hunted in a red flannel shirt and an old hat he probably wore every single freaking day, and he stood on the ground with his bow and he still shot deer.
And I guarantee he'd have a lot of scent lures and all that. Out in the field there.
What are some of the trends, though, that you guys are kind of glad that have come and gone when it comes to scent control for deer? One of them I know is fox urine and skunk essence and all that type of stuff.
I never used any of that stuff.
Oh, I did. I sure did. Especially, I was a pretty voracious predator hunter for a while. And I'd use skunk and fox scent. And I can tell you right now, that stuff is strong.
Jeff,
but it would confuse them.
It's a good thing you weren't using skunk essence whenever that trooper pulled you over, else you might have had a real problem on your hands.
Well, that was in my truck. We'd all had a real problem, let me tell you right now. A trooper would have been the least of my problems. When my wife got in the truck, that would have been a real problem. So, no, I have used those in film canisters and whatnot, and they confuse critters pretty good, I think. But what's come and gone.
I can't even.
I think they're gone finally. But they used to have those scent wicks that you light.
Oh
and
yeah, I remember
burn
those.
This little smoke.
No,
that just drove me nuts. I just thought that was the dumbest thing on. Now maybe they're still out there. I don't know, but I haven't seen them in a long time. So I don't know why it bothered me so much. But lighting anything and having a flume of smoke going
incense,
down.
hunting incense didn't work for
incense never made sense to me.
And then I never get they sell the little powder, the wind indicator.
Oh yeah.
It's called a dang like a pussy willow, and you just go like this or something. Why would you spend all that milkweed? That's what I meant. Sorry, milkweed. I have a whole bunch of that, and I stuff that in my pocket. But it's like if you can't figure out where the wind's going when you're sitting in, I think
it's kind of fun squirting it. And just,
look at that.
I just grab a leaf and toss it and see.
Well, the beauty of what you're talking about is if you take that little cattail plume or what have you, and you toss it into the wind, not only will it tell you the immediate direction, but as you watch that thing float down, you can see the swirls. And if it starts moving around and going off to the right, you know that there's some swirling going on. Whereas those powdery wind indicators don't.
Yeah,
tell
they
you
just
that.
go straight up and just.
And they disappear pretty fast. They
disappear
get
too
10
fast,
foot, 15 foot away from you. They're gone. Where that.
So I've got
milkweed
pockets full of milkweed pods, and I like it.
So what happens when you wash milkweed seeds?
I haven't done that yet.
grow.
Really?
I've washed a lot of stuff I shouldn't wash. But when you said trends that you wish would come back or wouldn't, I still swear I want one of those deer view mirrors because I would love to be able to see what's coming in behind me without turning my head. So,
Well, I got to say, now that every year goes by, deer obviously are walking quieter and quieter than they did the year before.
I swear.
Because it's just all of a sudden, like this
we're
morning,
losing our
like,
hearing, Aaron. That's really what's
no, not at all.
Funny how we get older and deer are tiptoeing now all of a sudden. No, it's
They
not.
obviously are.
Michael
No,
hears them
I
pretty
don't.
good.
I don't mean to brag or
I
anything.
don't have any problems hearing deer. I don't know what you're talking about.
Christy, I don't mean to brag or anything, but I can still on a good day hear a 20-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah, is that
especially
right?
if there's cottonwoods nearby.
Can't hear a squirrel barking on a squirrel hunt.
But
though.
I don't know how many times this year it's happened, at least a handful, where you're just like, man, this is boring. Oh my goodness, there's a deer right there.
I literally they drop out of the
Just like
sky
we're
and boom, there they
Coyotes
are.
will do that to you
Constantly.
Not so much for me on deer, but coyotes. Oh my gosh! But it is fun. That to me is one of the most awesome feelings when you just kind of turn your head and there's a deer standing.
Oh
right
yeah,
there.
or when you hear something and because the difference between the squirrels that
What
do
you-
that.
Yeah, you want it to be a
and
deer, and it's not.
and then,
think
but then you're sitting there going, "Don't breathe, don't move, don't look, don't breathe," and you're just like, you just want to look, you just want. That's why I want that deer view mirror.
Do they still make the all carbon suits and things like that? I mean, there used to be the suits. They had the. It was in long johns, the jackets, the bibs, and all that.
They
the
had
activated
the scent
carbon
killer or I forget the name
scent
brand.
blocker type clothing and whatnot, and you see that still. But back in the '90s, that stuff was
huge.
like you couldn't hardly find hunting clothing that didn't have scent blocker.
Yeah.
For another $150.
Exactly.
And it's always kind of interesting because that stuff would block. Maybe I'm sure it would. Charcoal line would block scent.
Charcoal absorb
but
scent.
the one thing that I always found interesting, and I know they worked. I know people also believe they work, but I just think, unless you just have a full body suit and face mask and everything on like a chem suit, you got scent coming up out of your neck, out of that charcoal suit.
Out of your mouth.
Your mouth is the worst. I mean, your mouth is where you got probably most of your scent coming out.
And they had gum. I remember.
That's right.
I remember buying the gum.
Camo gum, yeah.
Chlorophyll gum.
The chlorophyll gum and stuff, and I had some of that. But
Did it turn your tongue green?
I couldn't see my tongue, so
I bet it was. I bet it turned your tongue green.
Now
But-
I gotta
but
say, I had one of those. It was a cheaper version of. It was a coat that had that activated carbon layer in it and things like that. And I bought it of all places. I'm going to date myself here too, from Kmart, and their outdoor store at the like an end of the year clearance
Kmart's
thing.
like Walmart.
Oh no! Oh, don't worry, Christy. I've heard of Kmart. Don't worry.
What a Google.
I'm not
Stores
that.
are
Yeah.
places people used to go to buy stuff.
Oh my God! Did they have actual cashiers?
And it didn't matter how much I washed that coat. It didn't matter how much that I left it outside, let it get rained on, snowed on. It had a unique scent from the time I took it off the rack there at the store to
And
when
never
I finally
lost
just
that
tossed
scent.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was so. I think you had more breathability too. And this was an early version with a garbage sack. Just because I'd get in there and sweat. It didn't matter how cold it was out there. It would not let my
There's no breathability.
no
there.
breathability.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now if you really wanted to, like corner the market on scent control, now we have ozonics and all of those ozone machines and things like that. And I was reading a lot of, testimony or reviews about it. And one guy kept talking about how it made noise and that, now if you're sitting in a tree stand, that's one thing. But if I'm in a box blind, most likely that's going to muffle it a little bit. But he kept talking about the ozone itself, was hanging, and that the deer could feel that presence or smell that, and it's just like, well, that doesn't sound like it's doing much good at all, but there's a lot of mixed reviews on that. I don't know if it's worth spending $550 on something like that? Because they're expensive.
Hard to say, yeah, but it makes sense though, because again, scent is kind of molecular, right? So anything that can kind of control those molecules or the absorption of those, some science behind it.
And it goes back to kind of what you said, Jeff. Is it one of those things that the first few times they're around something like that, no big deal, right? But all of a sudden, if they hear it or they feel something different, smell something different, then all of a sudden, oh boy, we lost Bonnie when we walked past that scent or sound last time. Maybe we're not walking past it again. It's just hard to see. And that's the one thing, all this type of stuff, and there's some amazing marketing out there too that sounds really scientific and official, and they do a great job of getting the right people to tell you this is what it takes. The deer just do what the deer do. I mean, they defy, whatever. All right, we've all had deer walk right downwind of us, act like they never smelled us, and presented us with a shot if we wanted to take that critter. And we've had the ones, like you said, that are upwind. There's no way they could smell us, and all of a sudden it's they act like they did.
Yeah, and they're stomping and blowing and letting everybody else know that you're there.
Boom, they're gone.
One thing to always keep in mind, I firmly believe this, is just about every deer I've ever killed with a bow has made a mistake. And I've truly looked at it like that. And we've all seen deer. We've all had a chance to harvest deer and kill deer and plenty of deer. And it's the ones I haven't killed that have probably taught me a lot, because it's those big old deer, wise old deer, got that way from not making those mistakes.
Surviving.
And so a lot of deer will make scent mistakes, and we can infer from that deer aren't bothered by this, or deer don't. But there's a reason 5-6-year-old deer lived or survived 5-6 years old, because they likely don't make those mistakes. And so that's where scent control comes into play, when you can say, well, hedge your bets a little bit and control one or two more things that are within your control, because so much in hunting is chaos. It's just not within your control. And so if it's something you can control, it might make sense, depending on type of hunter you are, what your end game is. It might make sense to hedge your bets and control that as best you can, because not all deer are going to make mistakes.
Well, and I love it, and it's part of the allure of hunting, and part of the excitement around the campfire later on and stories down the road is we as humans always like to attribute success or lack thereof to one thing. We trace it back and circle it. All right, I did this and this happened. And just like you're talking about, Jeff, it's probably a multitude of things that happen to make it work out. And so we say, I'm never going without this type of product or this type of scent control or scent out there. But if we have the opposite, where it's just nothing's happening, and that's the one variable we zero in on, we do the opposite as well. Boy, that stuff just does not work. Doesn't.
Yep.
No.
And so it's always interesting. I think this will be a conversation that we have for years and years. As long as we're deer hunting, we're going to have conversations about how to fool a deer's nose, how to jam them up just enough so that we can, harvest them if we want to, as well as what works and what doesn't.
Yep.
So for last suggestion, one thing, if you're going to tell someone going out deer hunting this weekend, a tip for controlling your scent, what would it be?
Play the wind.
Play the wind.
Yeah.
Well, that one's kind of easy. Give me
It
another
is
one.
kinda
Give me a
easy.
second one.
I'm just saying.
Give me a second one. Come on
To me,
now.
it's the most important thing. Play the wind, because all the scent you throw out there, all the stuff you use to control sprays and everything else, the one thing you got to keep in mind is you got to play the wind. You got to hunt.
All right,
with
give
your
me a
nose to the
second one
wind.
then.
Just try to avoid contaminating your clothes with really abnormal scents.
Yeah. I mean, don't get gas while you're wearing your
yeah.
deer hunting clothes and
Don't
stuff.
contaminate.
But here's what I found is the big difference. It just depends on where you're at. What are those deer used to on a daily basis?
Oh, good.
And
good
I think
idea.
a lot has to do with that. If they know that pickup drives through 9 o'clock every day, check this or check that, that's not going to bother them. And if you can figure out those patterns, things that they see, things that they're used to, it's like we all know what it's like to look at turkeys when they're in a particular area and they're used to people, and you're thinking they're the dumbest things in the world, but get into their world and then they know something's different. And I think it's the same thing with deer, with most animals. If they're seeing things happen over and over again, it's probably not going to bother them as much.
That's a good point. I like that. And I should leave it right there, folks, but I can't. You brought up gas, and that's one thing I do want to ask. what is your gas getting routine during the deer season? Do you have something, especially, let's say we're bow hunting?
Usually I get gas from like, some of the big heavy pastas and maybe onions if there's too many if the onions aren't real cooked. But I mean, I try to avoid those foods.
That's a whole nother realm of scent contamination right there.
Fuel, Jeff. Fuel.
I'm fueling the fire here. I can tell you that.
Well played.
Oh my goodness.
There was, by the way, one of my science teachers pointed this out way back in my undergrad years, where there was a special type of thermal underwear, a base layer that was claiming all this scientific stuff about how it would take methane out of your own a fart, folks, and turn it into just harmless, hydrogen and oxygen, and just like. That's not methane. By the way, those are flammable too. But so keep your rear end away from any open flames. But you can't take methane and turn it into hydrogen. If you got to plan that much in advance,
I'd say that's more of an issue. You got to deal with on a different angle, maybe. But anyway,
gasoline. Let's go with gasoline, because that's one thing I really do, Fred. I'm kind of strategic about when I get it, how I get it during archery deer season.
Yeah. And you know what? There's times we're done hunting for the evening. We stop somewhere and we're like, God, we're going to have to get fuel before the morning, and we still have our gear on. So, but again, we spray down again and cover that up. But we had a really good friend of ours. He smoked in his tree stand and got a deer every year. And he was a bow hunter. And he smoked, and then he put it out. Here comes the deer, and he'd shoot, and he'd light up another cigarette, and he'd get a hold of us like, yeah, come help me drag this out, because he was 76.
Oh wow, Jeff, have you done anything different when you were archery deer hunting and getting gasoline in the truck?
Oh yeah, I mean there was a period of time when I was pretty fanatical about scent, where I'd come out of the trees, go to my truck. Before I get in my truck, I'd take the pants cover. I had a cover pant, the camouflage, and the jacket off, put them in a bag, put them in my truck. I would never, ever do that. And I'll never forget this. Years ago, I broke my cardinal rule, and I had my stuff on, and I wasn't going to get gas. I thought, I'm just going to go in and get a pop and some stuff. It's early morning, and I run into the gas station. It's like, I better go to the bathroom real quick. And I ran into the bathroom, and I did my business, and they have those little scent dispensers.
Oh, and it went right.
And I was just like, no. And I tried to move, and it just got me. And I'm not kidding you. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. And I go out to my truck. I'm like, nope, it's bad. I smell like fruity, something fruity. And I'm not kidding you. The whole morning, it just drove me nuts. Just bothered me.
I can just imagine Jeff and so no.
Just like that. Just total panic mode. I mean, I was kind of tiptoeing in there to begin with. Don't interact with anybody. Don't touch anything. I used to be that fanatical about it, and I'm not so much these days.
Would you like seeing that video?
I really would have liked. Well, depends on when this started. So
somebody walks to the bathroom and I'm over there. No.
Is he getting attacked by something there? Yeah. Is there a ghost in there or something? No, it's just our bathroom Malibu obsession.
I got the flower scent. Yeah. So
all right, I think we're gonna put a pin in it right there before this changes anything more. But folks, we appreciate you giving us a listen. Make sure you get us on the Facebook page. Give us a thumbs up, a like. Also, if you got something you do different, put it down in the comments down below. But until next time,
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.